You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Well, on that happy note, greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. John and I are totally juiced about today's show because we're going to be talking about a new book by Amy Touchette, who is a two-time past guest and friend of the show. And that's not all. Amy brought along a friend for the ride. Who'd that be? None other than photographer Larry Fink. Is it fair to call Larry a photo legend? We think so. And clearly the people at the Center for Creative Photography at the University of Arizona seem to think so too, as they recently acquired his complete archive of work. 3,000 prints and all of his negatives, images shot from the 1950s to the present, from his early series, The Beats, to Social Graces and The Vanities. And we're going to speak with Larry more about this in the second half of the show. But first, let's get to Amy's new book. Personal Ties, Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn is a continuation of the beautiful street portraiture that Amy has been producing over the years. I know I could speak for everybody on the crew here. We're all following her on Instagram, and the pictures are just great. Her series, Street Dailies, New York Young and Us, are filled with compassion and optimism and a palpable connection with her subjects and her city. So it's no surprise then when she started photographing the people of Bed-Stuy, her adopted Brooklyn neighborhood, the images and eventual book would be as beautiful as it is. And we will share the link to the book in our show notes. So if you don't have it, you will have it. Larry also wrote the foreword to Amy's book, and we'll get to that soon. But let me first read what the great Jamal Shabazz wrote about Amy's work. And I quote, "With a camera and a compassionate heart, she photographed ordinary people in the Bedford-Stuyvesant community, creating intimate portraits of personal ties, kinship, and individuality that are now frozen moments in time." Amy Touchette and Larry Fink, welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you both here. As I said, Larry, we're going to come back to you in a little bit, but Amy, let's start with you. Amy, you're basically photographing strangers you encounter on the street. Why do you think the word compassionate seems to come up a lot when people describe your work?
Well, I mean, I guess I can't really speak for anyone else, but I will say that if it does come up for viewers, then it's like the best case scenario, because I do think it's a reflection of the roots of why I photograph. I started looking into photography as a direct result of September 11th. I was living in New York and in part of the city that was cut off to traffic because it was in proximity to the towers, and it just looked like, just outside looked like no other New York that I had ever seen. And I was deeply sad, and I was so close to all this violence, and I just felt awful, and I felt disconnected, and photography was a way for me to feel better. And when I went out into the streets, I started photographing people, and I realized that eye contact was a gateway for empathy, at least for me. And so if people see that in my photographs, if that is relayed through my photographs, then that's the best case scenario.
Now, just to take a step back a second, before 9/11, were you active with photography? Was it something that was part of your life at all?
Just in sort of the regular everyday way. I did have a camera. I did photograph my life just like other people with a photo album, my friends, my family. But I had no idea what an f-stop was. I didn't know how to develop film. I decided photography might help me during this time because I knew that it would involve gaining people's trust. And I just thought that would be the most amazing art possible. I couldn't imagine any other. Yeah, I was a writer and a painter. I still support myself writing. And those are two just super lonely paths. And I just felt so disconnected, like I said, and going out and photographing people, looking people in the eye, just keeps it really real. It's not like it's always this jubilant, joyous exchange between two people when I'm out in the streets. But if you go out and you look around, you see a lot of things, you see everything. And it's just, I find it a very healthy way to be engaged with the world.
These days, everyone's using their phone. You're using a twin lens Rolleiflex. You're using an old piece of analog technology. You're being very obvious that you're taking a photograph when you aim your Rolleiflex at somebody. Nothing's being hidden. You're being upfront and saying, I am taking a photograph. Nothing
Yes.
sneaky about it.
No. And I also work with an iPhone, so I'm well aware of the differences between the cameras and how they affect people on the street. And of course, their output I'm completely clear on. But yeah, these images and personal ties are very much a collaboration. And I do think the Rolleiflex can often be a conversation piece. And I do think it sort of helps maybe persuade some of the people to work with me for a second, because it is such a different camera and it's film. And one of my joys of making this series was talking to kids about film, and also letting them try on my camera or take a picture with my camera. It's very interactive, and to me it's so much about those interactions and so little about the actual output of the print. Of course I want to make a good photo. Of course I want a memory of what just happened. But really it's about those in-person moments for me that keep me so in love with this medium.
And Amy, how long will you linger, if that's the right word, in order to get what you think is that photo and that right memory, if you feel it's kind of not working out in the first few frames?
Well, these are really quite short interactions, at least the photography part. Sometimes I get into long conversations with people, but I just take 2 frames of people. So there's, the beginning shot, and then there's the second shot, and then it's over. And I do that pretty deliberately because, I've found that people, the more time that goes on, the more self-conscious people get. And I'm also very aware that I'm taking their precious time away from their lives. Even if they're in the park and, hanging out with their buddies, they don't want to hang out in the park with me. So I do try to be very respectful of their time. And, for the first photograph, I really don't give them much guidance at all. I tell them to look into the camera, but this is really such a collaboration, and I really want to give my subjects a place and a space for them to present themselves to the camera. I've already exerted my heavy hand by pulling them aside and asking them if they'd like to be photographed. So for me, it's really important to, not have them feel rejected at the start and tell them, that's not quite good. Can we try this again? Or, can you please do this? And, everyone I photograph is in the setting in which I found them. So, if you see pictures of people in the book that are on the stoop and one is over here and the other is over there and the other person is back there, that's exactly how I found them. And I also like that because I feel like that's another way for the people in my pictures to present themselves in the way that they want to be presented. So yeah, the first image, they do what they want. The second image, I might give them some slight direction, but it's pretty light. And then we get what we get, and I don't fret about it.
And which one turns out usually? Which one do you find yourself liking better, the first or the second?
Great question. It's kind of even. It's kind of even. Some of the things that people do in the first frame, I couldn't dream up, and of course they say so much about them. So I love giving people that freedom. And I also think it's, a show of respect. So.
Yeah. Well, I so much of street photography has to be about respect, especially when it's as close as yours. And that you're working in a neighborhood where you're seeing folks over and over again, I imagine.
Yeah, it's a really big responsibility when you decide that the streets are going to be your canvas. How are you going to handle yourself out there, and what are you going to photograph, and what are you going to decide not to photograph? And of course, talking to people is paramount. And how are you going to discuss what your aim is out on the street, because it's kind of a weird thing to do. Street photography is kind of weird. And you have to let people know that you're not, up to no good.
Something I'm kind of curious about is that what's the percentage of time that you intentionally go out to take pictures as opposed to going out about your day and having a camera just in case something comes up that catches your eye?
Well, I save those moments for my iPhone, which is, tethered to my hand whenever I go out. It's in my hand. The photo, the camera's open. Like, I'm always ready to take a picture, whether I'm, walking to the subway or at the cleaners, sort of always armed with it, because I feel like, that's one of the greatest things that the iPhone gives us, is that we can take it around with us everywhere, and it's super small, et cetera. So those are, those in-between moments that the iPhone maybe will capture and maybe won't. The Rolleiflex, I tend to go out with in the warmer months, from like June to September. I try to go out from 3 p.m. to sundown. And, that's partially because the light is nicer. It's partially because people tend to have more free time at that time of day.
True.
So I'll just work in the morning and then go out, every day if possible. It's always on my calendar. And if I can't make it out, I can't make it out. I do have bills to pay. I'm not independently wealthy, so I can't, but it's such a pleasure for me. And then in the colder months, I basically look at what I photographed. I don't recommend this to students necessarily, but I don't even develop my film until the fall, until the colder months. I just stay in the headspace of photographing, and that keeps me really focused. Should I have a light leak in the camera, I'm going to be like devastated by the fall, and that's why I don't recommend it to students. But this is what I do. Yeah.
How long did it take you to kind of come to understand that rhythm about you? The seasonal approach, if it were, because it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I just sort of decided, I don't know, I've been a street photographer for about 20 years, and maybe like 8 years in, I just decided to work with the seasons, and it really helped. It just, my mind is constantly split in a gazillion directions, and photography is this huge gift in my life. It's a lifestyle. It's not even an action. It's a mindset, and it's often an antidepressant for me. So I'm super careful with what messes with it. I always want it to be as free and as pure and as open as possible. And not, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have photography. I don't know how I'd manage. It's been such a nice thread for me to keep my focus in life. And like I also said, it just keeps things really real. You go out and you see stuff. And
I wanted to ask about that earlier. And now that it is, I guess, 20 years, has this kind of ability, if you want to call it that, has it grown over the years, or did it get you to a place that you were looking for 20 years ago? And once you found that place, you knew photography was the thing and you're sticking with it?
I'd say that I knew I was getting signs from the start when I enrolled in my first ICP class with Jeff Mermelstein, this street photographer whom I greatly admire. I would say there were signs that this is right for me. And it's just been like a slow, steady incline until, today. So I definitely, there were lots of skills that I didn't have that I needed to be out in the street. A lot of it is just like interpersonal skills and emotional intelligence, to be honest, and just like, how do you talk to people, especially if they're strangers? Like, how do you introduce yourself? And so there's a lot about getting to know oneself before you even go out, so that you know how to present yourself to others in the most efficient way, because yeah, especially in New York, like people don't have all day to give you. So what are you going to say in the quickest amount of time that's going to persuade someone to let you photograph them? So you kind of have to do a lot of introspection to figure out what those words are and how to say them in the shortest amount of time. While also, being aware that, yeah, you're talking to another person, and what are the signs and what are the emotions that they're giving off, and then it just becomes a big improvisation, a big beautiful improvisation, among humanity.
So maybe, Larry, we can speak to you for a minute about Amy's work. You wrote the foreword to her book, and it's actually a poem. I'd do it injustice if I read it, the whole thing, but there was a few lines I liked. A neighborhood is not exactly a neighbor, but there are those within. And as we share, we care. These pictures are round and square. So can you tell us a bit about how, you came across Amy's work and what you find special about it?
I've been looking at the book now as you guys have been talking away. And one of the things which is very, very prevalent is the patience of the people that Amy is photographing. They see her as a friendly, but nevertheless an outside interloper. And they lay back and they just watch her. Sometimes with kindness, sometimes with disgruntledness, sometimes this way and that way. Of course, it's like everybody. So there is a kind of a thread which goes on within the people themselves, which is equivalent to the thread that goes on within Amy, which is the openness. They're not quite so open as she is.
I think that's a pretty good reading. That's for sure. Sometimes, are you pretty good, you think, Amy, at picking out, the right people that you see? I don't know, want to put this in a numerical way, but do you usually find the winners, or even if it's somebody who you think is going to give you just the nastiest stare, but it's a beautiful, nasty stare?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty hard to predict how people are going to, whether they're going to be up for being photographed or whether they're not, because a lot of people have resting faces that don't parlay like the realities of who they are. We're often lost in our thoughts and we show that on our face. But then if someone stops you for a second, then a smile emerges and, you're sort of presented with a different facade. But I do think, it helps to choose people who aren't in a rush, to begin with.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of difficult to decide or to express like who I would choose over other people. I feel like people who wear their personality on their sleeve somehow is, obviously a camera can only see light on surface, right? So that's all we've got. And I think that has something to do with who I choose, if they can somehow wear themselves on their sleeves. And I feel like the camera can pick that up. I also photographed a lot of people together, couples, friends, and family. And that can really help the camera show the viewer what we have here, because there's dynamics between the people as well as between me and them.
I find myself with your work often asking myself, all right, well, what's the relationship? What's the backstory? How long have they been together? How many times did they break up and get back together? All those questions.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of the great things about street photography is that there is so much room for viewers, and viewers want to participate. If they can't participate in an image, then they just move on. And I feel like there are so many unanswered potential questions in street photography because you don't have names, or sometimes you have places, sometimes you have dates, sometimes you don't, but like that's pretty much all you'll get. Location, it's pretty sparse. And so there's lots of room for the viewer to get in there and decide for themselves what they're looking at.
So can I ask a bit about some of the practical aspects of it? I'm assuming most of these images were shot before COVID. Is that true? And when
yes.
and when did the discussions about the book come about? We all know how books can be super expensive, and a lot of photographers are even asked to invest in their own projects to a nth degree. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that, but also about, who helped you with the editing and the sequencing and the design, because the book itself is like a little gem. I think it's beautiful. I love the colors and the photo selection, the pacing, everything.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I photographed from 2015 to 2018, and when I had to take 2019 off, but I kind of thought that I would photograph Bed-Stuy forever. It just felt like just so lovely. And again, I live here, so it just got better and better and better for me. But then when COVID hit, I just thought, wow, I guess this series is over. I certainly had enough photographs. But I just suddenly felt like I didn't think that like pre-COVID life could exist with present COVID life photographically. And a couple of months later, so I decided, so that summer of 2020, I was at the beach at Coney Island in Brighton Beach and started a new series on the beach. But in August of 2020, I got an email from Martin Schilt, who is the owner of Schilt Publishing based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And he and I had met at PhotoFest in 2012. Obviously, like almost 10 years later, and had been in touch on Instagram and stuff like that. And he basically wrote to me and said, if you could do a book, what book would you do? Let's talk. And so he didn't even know I was sitting on this work. And I decided I wanted to figure out a way to release it that was special. And a few of the photographs showed at the National Portrait Gallery in London. But, I didn't even think book yet. I still sort of grappling with the fact that it was over and COVID has been such a mind-bending experience. I wasn't really thinking yet too strictly about how I was going to release it. Anyway, I showed him this work and he loved it, and we decided to go for it. And Martin has been an incredible collaborator and partner. His designer, Victor Levy, is amazing. It was really fun to work with him. I'm so used to working alone. It was great to have someone else to look at the pictures with a totally fresh eye and give their 2 cents about it. I also, I had, I guess there were maybe like 700 or 800 pictures that I had made over the course of the years. And I think we had about 75 in the first edit. And the more I looked at it and the more I sort of was showing other people, I was getting the feedback that it was a little too long. And my first book, Shoot the Arrow, A Portrait of the World Famous Bob, was also too long. And I knew that, a little after the fact. And so I always thought, well, if I do another book, I want to make this like super tight, awesome edit. And so when I was getting that feedback, I thought, let's just like pare this down. And for me, I was so involved, I couldn't do it. And so I actually consulted with Elizabeth Biondi, who was the visuals editor at The New Yorker for many years. And she helped me. And it was fascinating to see her, we were doing this over Zoom and I could see her bring her eye closer to the computer and make her decision. We put them in, A, B, and C piles. A and B were a little, both are good. C is definitely no.
And what do you think was it's a tough question, but what do you think was the factor or the main factors that was pushing things into the B or the C pile? Was it about repetition within the series, or something about the image itself, or
I think it's the latter. I think it was the latter. I think to an outsider, it was probably a lot easier to see which photos were really working and which weren't. And Larry helped me with this too. Yeah, Larry and I, had a conversation, and actually both the results that both of them gave me were very similar. But I think it's sort of like that's a question that's difficult to answer. Like what is your muse? It's like what gives a picture punctum. Try to explain it. Good luck.
Right.
And so I think she was just really.
Did you veto everybody and keep something in that was important to you?
I'm happy to say that there is nothing in there that is just for me. And, they're all there because we felt that they were super solid. And are there others that could have been in the book? For sure. But maybe, I don't know, someday there'll be a release somehow, some way. But this is a very subjective, intimate, small portrayal of Bed-Stuy. Bed-Stuy is a lot of things. It's a huge neighborhood. It's a lot of things to a lot of people. This is just my very subjective take on it. And it's also a fraction of my subjective take on it. It's like 7-8% of what I actually photographed. So it's not meant to be some objective sampling of the neighborhood.
All right, we are going to take a short break. We come back more with Amy Touchette and Larry Fink. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. The best way to support the show is by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For links to gear and more information on today's guests, check out the show notes in your podcast app or visit our homepage on the B&H Explorer website and join the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group. And now, back to the show.
Okay, we are back. We'd like to give Larry Fink a proper introduction, but there aren't enough hours in the day to do so. But how about we just start with his solo exhibits at Museum of Modern Art in 1979 and one in Philadelphia Museum of Art in 2018, almost 40 years apart. There's the 2 Guggenheim Fellowships, an Affinity Award, 16 books, and countless high-profile assignments and publications. You're also a teacher, and I have to say that, Larry, it's a pleasure to have you with us today on the show. And by the way, for whatever reason, you're not familiar with Larry Fink's incredibly very warm, textured, and nuanced black and white work, Google it right now. We'll wait. We dropped a bunch of quarters in the meters downstairs. We got on time. So go look at the stuff. We'll give you a few minutes and then come back. In the meantime, Larry, what kind of connection do you feel between your work and that of Amy's?
Just simple humanity. No, if you're talking about a photographic connection in terms of stylistically and the way that we each use light and what kind of moments that we seek to choose in terms of the subjects that we go after and so on and so forth, I think that there's a vague connection, but only a photographic one, but not necessarily profoundly intrinsic or organic. We are, as I say, our humanity is the deepest connection, which is to say that Amy is an open, accessible, and generous partisan of humankind, and as I try to be myself. And so with that kind of sense of trying to honor the individual who we photograph and make a picture which has some kind of resounding scintillation, well then, that's the nature of why and how to become a photographer and why the photographs might actually mean something to others.
There's one thing I know, you definitely get in closer than Amy would do. And by the way, there's something kind of interesting I find about that, because I find a lot of your work is extremely close up and almost on top of your subjects, yet using cameras that really don't focus that close. And I was kind of intrigued by that.
Well, you're wrong.
Correct me, please.
The Rolleiflex, which Amy uses, is something which only focuses up to 3.5 feet. At a certain point, when I was working in the square, and I still always work in the square, I went to a Mamiya Flex, a C330, also a double lens
which
reflex,
has a bellows,
which has a bellows, and you can go close.
Yes.
And so,
okay.
And I have to say, I'm extremely attracted to body aroma.
You do get right in there. I will tell you, you do get right in there.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I've always said that if I wasn't a photographer, I'd be arrested and be in jail a long time ago, because basically, if anything, I'm a physicalist, which is to say that I like to lick everything I see. And
my God.
As long as you do that after the photo.
Yeah.
Good.
Now, one of the things that I definitely picked up, because I've been familiar with your work for the longest time, but prepping for the show, I went back and looked at a lot of your photographs. And something that I noticed, which you can't say about a lot of people, you've been photographing for over 5 decades now. And
6.
what's interesting is that you could take photographs that you took in the earliest days and randomly mix them up with photographs you take in the past couple of years, and this series would visually hold up as a unit. In other words, your style is so solid that even though you're photographing different genres and different kind of subjects, the way you are setting up your pictures, I hate to use the word formula, but it's so solid that you could mix and match your pictures into any combination and they all work together. That's the way it hit me. I'd say 95% of the pictures you took.
Well, thank you very much for thinking that. I don't necessarily agree with you absolutely, but I do agree that there is a kind of an inner core of a visual revelation or presence. And the way I see things, one of the things about Amy's pictures is they're much, much looser than mine.
Yes.
In the sense that she's very, very happy just to meet people. Me, not so. I don't give a shit about people. No, I do, but but I actually do very much so. But I don't. I'm not quite. I'm much more, if you will, aesthetically ambitious in terms of formulating the frame, so that all of the elements within the frame work towards the conclusive ambience of what it is that I actually meant by confronting these people and trying to, if you will, steal their soul, or at least liberate their soul so that others can feel it.
It's almost as if you took Amy's subject and you threw them into a front-loading dryer and photographed it with your lens against the glass as they're tumbling around inside. There's almost that kind of intimacy to it.
I'm going to have to take a bath.
Amy, this may be an obvious question for you, but do you guys think of your work as portraiture? I mean, what makes a portrait a portrait? I mean, and Larry, same question for you, maybe. In some of these images of boxers I'm looking at now, would you call them a portrait?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I consider myself a street portrait photographer, actually.
Which is, as opposed to, let's say, a photo of someone in the street that is offering a take on their personality, how would you define a portrait then? I know that's a tough question, but is there something, even within your own work, when you know, okay, this is a portrait, and this just happens to be a photo I took of somebody?
For me, I think...
go ahead.
That was more for you, Amy, but...
go on, Amy, you go on.
No, please, Larry.
No.
Nobody wants to answer.
You answer this difficult question. No, I mean, for me, for me, a portrait, the picture has to be like just about that person or those people. I don't know. I don't want to back myself into a corner here,
sure.
But like with traditional street photography, where there's usually a vista and there's usually a bunch of people and it's a decisive moment. And there's, the anonymity, like I wouldn't consider that portraiture, even though there are people in it. I feel like street portraiture is like the black sheep of the street photography genre. Like people don't really know how to talk about it. People don't really even try to talk about it. Like, Deanne Arbus considered herself a street photographer, but if you asked, I don't know, Joel Meyerowitz, whether he thought she was a street photographer, he'd probably say no, based on his definition in bystander, at least. So I work in this kind of like murky area that's somewhere between street photography and maybe documentary work. I don't know.
Yeah. What about if there's a group of people? Do you lock on to one person that maybe you're making a portrait of within that group? It's kind of hard to make a portrait of 4 people at the same time, right?
It is hard. And I think that's part of the reason that I gravitated toward it. Also just because there's just more information in the frame. It's just a more interesting, more places for the viewer to go. So yeah, it's not easy, and I don't think, I never want my subjects to feel rejected. So even if there's someone who I really like more than another person in a group, I don't really express that, because I don't want anyone to feel alienated, or to me it's super important that no one feels rejected. So I in general, if I'm photographing a group, then I'm there for the dynamic, and we'll just see what happens.
But what is the dynamic, though, Amy? The dynamic, for the most part, that's expressed in the pictures is the dynamic between that group, or that person, and you. There's not a dynamic in terms of them running around the street, having fun, cuddling their baby, playing basketball, what have you. It's not street photography in the active sense. It's street photography in the sense that you're actually soliciting people off the street or from the street, so that you can stand in front of them and make a picture which somehow or another satisfies your soul.
Yeah, I mean, because I feel like you guys are saying my pictures were looser than Larry's. I feel the total opposite. I mean, I remember Larry last winter. I never laughed so hard. Like, he basically told me my pictures were boring. And I totally understood where he was coming from. You look at Larry's photos and there's so much energy. They're so expressive. They're so liberated. The compositions are complex. There's a lot of, hands that don't belong to bodies, and you don't know where they came from. With me, things are pretty stagnant. And
well, they're from a safe distance. I mean, you're basically, you're not on top of your subject. And I think that's one of the differences. Like, Larry says, okay, now, Amy, you got your picture. Now get out of my way. I'm going in.
Right.
In a sense.
Yeah.
But first of all, let me get rid of the word stagnant. Stable.
That was my word. You never. I am. It's true. I'm maybe the worst photographer in the world, because I'm so uninterested in, I'm so overwhelmingly interested in the person that I can really just totally end up focusing on that exchange, and sort of lose sight of some of the other elements of a frame. And I both care and don't care about that,
So quite the opposite for me, by the way, and especially in my later years. In fact, a long time ago, a chap when I was doing the work on the beatniks, I was a beatnik myself. Robert Cordier, who is a Belgium intellectual who was on the trip with us, said to me, and I was always saying, he said, "Why do I photograph?" And I would say, "I photograph to show the dignity of man. I need to make a collection of dignity so that people could live better and freer and all that kind of stuff." Today, I don't care about that at all. I just care about making a frame with the dignity within, because I always am involved with people, but so that the frame has its own complete action and its activity and its revelatory excitement, so that it defies the logic of what a frame should be.
Well, that's incredible. Hate to ask such a silly question after this, but how often, and obviously I'm looking at the loggers now, totally different setting than you might find in like the vanities, but do you talk with your subjects much?
Hold my tongue. Can you hear? Can you feel? No, I talk all the time. I mean, no, I'm not. I mean, I'm not. Let's put it this way: I'm not an outsider as a photographer. I don't think of myself now at 80 years old. I'm no longer an outsider. But let's be clear: I live on a farm away from everywhere. I haven't been to New York in 2.5 years. COVID, thank you. And also the density of the town. I don't like it very much. And so I am in essence an outsider, but in terms of my psychology, I don't feel myself to be an outsider at all.
I was just going to tell you that, about a year ago, they raised most of Midtown, and it's now mostly farmland and townhouses.
Come on back.
I'd like to do that. I have my road. I have 2 tractors. I'll start driving now.
So, Larry, maybe we can talk a bit about your archive, which was part of the conversation from the get-go. And thanks, Amy, for sharing that news with us. Over the past several years, as I've come to understand it, you've been giving parts of your archive to the Center for Creative Photography, which is really, the landmark spot for collecting the great photography, great art photography. And can you talk about how those conversations came about? Was it one of these life's thrills for that phone call to happen, or?
I have to tell you that most of my life thrills come from a big hustle. Nobody called me; I called them, and
right, okay.
And it's not that and in fact, when Becky first came out to see me, they were interested in getting maybe 100 pictures, and then as she sat down at the studio and saw that she was surrounded by 60 years of work and much of it formidable, she started to decide upward in terms of what she wanted to actually have for the collection.
Was she less familiar? I mean, in seeing the work, she was less familiar with some of the other series, or it was just
it could have been that. Listen, those are very busy people. Most there are from lesser to greater photographers are all inside trying to communicate with them for all kinds of good reasons. And they don't have that much time but they did have, ultimately, I did seduce them, I guess, to have with the quality of the work and also with the really, really good dinners that Martha made for everybody who came to stay.
I've been to those dinners. So there.
Yeah. I thought it was, you promised them a ride in the tractor.
But Larry, didn't you also tell me that when there was a lull in work, in order to keep your people employed, you decided to make prints of everything? And so you also had that to offer this institution. And I just bring that up because I just print on demand, because I can't really think just financially and practically beyond whatever, printing whatever someone needs from today. But I really was struck by that when Larry told me, because by then, now he's got these vintage prints to offer. And I feel like that had to have been really exciting for them to have all these prints already made. And so that strategy on your part, I feel like really paid off in this way, and others. But.
Well, it's absolutely true. The thing is that I've always been a working photographer, which is to say I work for magazines, I work for books, I work for annual, whatever you can imagine a photographer could do. I was trying to do it because I had to make a living, and I wanted to make a creative living. And sometimes I must tell you, in looking at the archives and negatives and so on, my life wasn't that creative. There was a lot of mediocrity involved there, but such is the nature of real life. Nevertheless, when there was a lull in work, and I always had assistants working with me in the darkroom, otherwise I couldn't produce as I did, I would say, okay, let's make fine art prints. And in those days, years and years ago, paper was pretty cheap and beautiful, Patriga Rapid with Agfa and so on and so forth. And that we probably have at the studio probably 30,000 prints from over the years. And I did that so I can keep my people employed, because if I laid them off, as so many people do, they would be screwed. I didn't want to do that to people. I don't screw people. I didn't print them with the idea of making money off of them, by the way. It was just some idea of posterity or keeping working, whatever. But now it turns out that they're worth a small fortune because of the luck of my talent and the luck that I did have talent like I do. And they're worth a small fortune, and they are purchased in a donorship, then to be given to different institutions here and there and everywhere. So I make a living without without having to hustle a living any longer. I can make a living just by moving the archives around. And by the way, you don't get what you call it, appraisal prices when you do this type of thing. You go much lower. But since I have that quantity, as Amy suggests, I can afford to do that.
And because they're vintage prints, they're worth more. Is that correct?
They're worth more. Yeah, I don't want to go into numbers,
no,
but
of course not. No, of course
they're
not.
worth a bunch of cash. Yeah.
I mean, besides the financial ease to some degree and not having to hustle, I mean, there must be a great feeling of satisfaction, no, or that the creative element has been recognized to this degree, and now that the work has a home or several homes, does it feel good?
I can't be more than satisfied with my own personal trajectory. That's for sure. I can be less than satisfied in terms of what the actual photographs have actually been able to. Since I was brought up as a left-wing person with the idea of changing the world for the better, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. I'm not happy on that level at all.
You're a few years older than I am, but I'm already at a point where I'm starting to say that, wow, look at this. There actually is an end to this story. Giving up your project. Yeah, seriously. But turning over your work in this sense where say, okay, somebody bought over your life's work. Okay. Is it kind of bittersweet in a sense?
Well, the bittersweetness comes from what I just said about the nature of the world.
Yeah.
That's for sure. As far as the finality factor is concerned, it doesn't have to be final. It so happens that I haven't photographed in a month or two because I don't really have the same kind of curiosity and the same kind of interests that I used to have when I was a kid, when every person that came in front of me had considerable wonder for me. That's not so. Unfortunately, I've known people for a long time, and I know them only too well. And sometimes it's not so pleasant. And I'm not interested particularly in making negative or sarcastic or cynical pictures about anything. So what I have to find as subject matter now is things which are very, very, very passionate about love, like mothers and daughters and fathers, and something to do where people can touch each other, because we're in an era where people are out of touch with each other. In terms of me just generally being a photographer out there in the street or wherever, I'm not so terribly inclined to do that right now. First of all, I've had, how many pictures? A couple million, how many 30 million pictures I've taken in my life? I don't know.
Oh my God.
All on film? Is that a dumb question? I'm sorry to not know what you've been working with lately. But
not on film. No, I've been working in digital for the last 12 years. As soon as digital came in, it was a blessing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And let me ask you, I'm curious because I go back and forth between my feelings between it, and I'm mostly digital at this point, even though, again, like yourself, I was raised on film. Is it because of the fact that the immediacy of it? I mean, because for me, I still happen to love shooting film, but I don't want to I don't want to put my time into the mechanical end of it. I just want to be able to take the picture and then run with the image and do what I want to do with that, and not start with rolls of film developing and washing and drying and all that other stuff. Is that part of your reason why you like digital better?
Well, yes, of course. The ease of its inception, sure. On the other hand, let me tell you a small story about when I was working with Social Graces, about obsession and film. I would get dressed up in my tuxedo. I would jump into my Willys 1957 truck and drive to New York for a debutante ball. I would park my 1957 truck, my 57 trick, which took 4.5 hours to get to New York because it doesn't go faster than 45 miles an hour. It's a work truck. And there I was in that truck, in that tuxedo, all geared up with cameras and whatnot. I would park in front of the debutante ball. Nobody would ticket a truck like that. And work for 4 or 5 or 6 hours, jump back in the truck, drive for 4.5 hours, get home, get to the darkroom, develop the film right then and there, go to sleep for an hour, make contact sheets right then and there, go to sleep for an hour, look at the contact sheets, and start to make prints. Why? There was it wasn't a commercial concern. Nobody needed these pictures at all. It was just my own inner obsession to see what it was that had to be seen.
That used to be called, that's what chimping used to be.
As far as film is concerned, I loved film. I loved the whole process that you were talking about in a disdainful way. But
Yeah, Alan.
I'm sorry if it came across that way. I mean, look, people who know me know I still own like 7 classic film cameras that I use. So no, but
so do I. I mean, mine are all in a cabinet. Yeah, it's just so beautiful, those cameras, the Leicas and the Mamiya 6s and whatnot. I have. Oh my God.
And Amy, I want to jump back to you though as we wrap up the show. Maybe talking a little bit about this idea that we touched on with time and the images that you take. I mean, do you feel at all when you're working about the long term of your image and even the long term of the connection with your subject? I mean, 10, 20, 30 years down the line, or is it really something that's so much of the moment and the present that it's hard to think of these things as something captured in time?
I would say the latter. I mean, I'm well aware that photographs age well. You know, photograph today and in 20 years, they're going to have an inherently different interest to them. So I'm aware that that happens. But when I'm out photographing, it's not quite as extreme as like the flow state. But photography is the art of listening, like with your eyes and ears, and also just every cell of your body. When you're out photographing on the street, there's a lot of intuition, hopefully, that's coming through you. And so there's just a lot of feeling and not so much thinking. And which is why I sort of assume I'm going to die as a pedestrian, because one of these days my mind is not going to be where it should be. And I'm going to try to walk across the street and zip, here will come a bus, and I'll just end it right there.
Boom.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
But that'll be okay, because then you can just spread my ashes in the street, which is where I want to be anyway. So I'll just like land in my own graveyard. It'll be fine, you know.
That's very poetic, but you're not allowed.
That's what all that gray snow is that you see around this.
Exactly. So no, for me, it's, I'm doing everything I can to be present. I don't really know how to photograph on the street without putting all that behind it. So yeah, I'm definitely about the moment.
And just to clarify on your end, Amy, what was your camera that you're using? It's the Rolleiflex
Rolleiflex 3.5F planar camera. Right. Yeah, and I love it. It's simple and easy, and there are just 3 buttons you need to care about. It's just
the menus are really simple on it.
Yeah, so simple.
And when you're out, do you have it around your neck, or do you carry it in a bag and then bring it out after you ask?
I like to have it out. And also, like I said before, it can be a conversation piece. So people just seeing it will say, oh, my dad had that camera, always their dad or their uncle, like never their mom or their aunt, but whatever. And so that'll spur conversation. And of course, I'm going to ask for a portrait if I get that window of opportunity. So yeah, for me, it's really important to have it out.
You put together the book with the help of a Kickstarter, is that true?
I did, yeah. I initially got fiscal sponsorship through NYFA, the New York Foundation for the Arts, and I raised some money privately, but it became apparent that I needed to do a Kickstarter. And I read this book by Alex Daly called The Crowd Sorcerer, and it tells you everything that you need to do to have a successful campaign. And there were even a couple of things that I couldn't do that she recommends. And I still, halfway through my campaign had made my fundraising goals. So for anyone out there listening and is thinking about a Kickstarter, it is possible. I recommend that you read this book. You're going to feel like totally equipped with the knowledge that you need to get started. And you have to make a video, and that can be, I don't know, a lot of photographers don't like being in front of the camera, and I'm one of them. So for me, it was like, how do I do this, and be in front of the camera the least possible amount of time. So, everyone's going to have their own personal challenges with it, but it's really great. And it's also, it's like pre-marketing for your book. So there's a few good reasons to undertake it other than just getting funding. So I do recommend that people try it out if they're thinking about it.
All right. Well, we are coming to the end of yet another great show. Amy, again, third time on the show. It's always great having you here. People want to catch up with little snippets of your book and anything else you're doing. Where should they go to?
They could go to my website. I'm going to have a couple of book events, one in the Lower East Side in Bed-Stuy. Also, my gallery in Paris, France, will be doing something there. But the book can be found at the MoMA store, at Rizzoli, at Strand Books, at Greenlight Books in Brooklyn, and Spoonbill in Sugartown in Brooklyn. You can buy signed copies on my website. And also, if you live abroad, you can buy directly from Schilt Publishing, my publisher. And since he's over in Amsterdam, it'll get to you really quickly and cheaply. I'm also giving an ICP course this spring, a 10-week course that will basically, the aim is just to get you comfortable photographing out in the street, and also just sort of trying on different methodologies to see what feels good for that student in particular. So that's what I have going on. Oh, I'm also giving a Zoom talk for the Los Angeles Center of Photography's 8th annual Street Week. That's in April. And again, if anyone is curious, they can just go to my website and find the details there.
And it'll be in our show notes as well. And what are you doing in your spare time? No, that's a pretty good schedule. That's a pretty good schedule you got there. That's good. And again, Amy, it's always great having you on the show.
Alan, thank you so much. I adore you guys.
Larry, first time on the show. So how do you like it, huh?
I'm having a good time.
Good. Now, if people want to catch up with what you're doing now, what you have done and what you will be doing, where can people go to?
Lord knows.
And we're going to have links to the Lord in our show notes, by the way.
No, Larry, they should go to your Facebook page and read your wonderful poetry and all your thoughts.
Oh, great.
Well, if you say so. I mean, I write poems every day or so on like that, or essays or what have you on Facebook if you're interested in that. And I'm not a good writer, but some people like it, so that's important, very important actually.
You are a good writer, and
I think
you
you're
have
a good writer.
an incredible. Of course, he's like, his wordplay is kind of mind blowing. Like, it's very, very flow statey, and it's really beautiful.
Well, people, you're much more kind than I am, but at any rate, and then photographically speaking, I really am not photographing now at all, not one bit, except for still lifes around the farm. Little types of shards of light that come through the windows, et cetera, very abstract, very sensualized, but not anything that people would actually know of mine. It's an
You're
entirely
shooting for yourself. At this point in time, that's what you're doing. You're making yourself happy.
Somewhat, yes.
Or killing time. One or the other. I have no idea. I don't know. But no, seriously, that's a good place to be when you could actually just take pictures for yourself and there's no other pressure to it. And I think that's a good place to be able to get to.
I like to write quite a bit, and I think I'm going to start painting. I used to paint when I was a kid, and I have paints and stuff, and I think I'm going to start painting again. And I do play piano, jazz piano and harmonica, so I do a lot of that. And then there's stuff to do around the farm, and there's stuff to do with Martha, my magnificently creative painter, who's my wife, and my daughter, family stuff, which goes on and on and on and so on.
Larry and I will be performing Thursday night at the Theater Inn. The Harmonic Cats 2.0 is the name of our new group. And anyway, Amy, Larry, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great conversation, and we hope to have you both back on the show soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
much, guys. Thanks, Amy.
If you
Thank
are
you, Larry.
If you're a fan of the show, you should be among the first to find out when a new episode goes live. That said, if you're not yet a subscriber, head on over to wherever you get your podcasts and sign up. It's free, it's easy, and you'll never miss another episode of the best darn photography podcast out there. Period. There, I said it. Till next time, my name is Alan Weitz, and on behalf of John Harris and Jason Tables, thank you oh so much for tuning in today. That was a lousy one.